released an official statement on Monday saying that the government will implement a real name system for cryptocurrency transactions while cracking down on illegal activities involving virtual money. But it said a ban on cryptocurrency is not in the works and that the government has yet to come to a final decision. This latest announcement follows the Justice Minister's remarks last week that the government is preparing a bill to ban virtual currency trading on domestic exchanges, which rattled the market. And before we sit down with an expert to talk more about this, let's first get a check on what's making the news at this hour with our Devin Whiting at the News Center. Devin.
Hi, June. Well, first up, the two Koreas will meet on Wednesday to start talking details regarding North Korea's participation in the upcoming PyeongChang Winter Olympics, including whether South and North Korea will participate as a single team. Seoul's Unification Ministry has also launched a special task force to help the North's delegation while they're here. Kim Mo-gyun starts us off.
South Korea's Unification Ministry on Tuesday launched its joint support team to assist North Korean delegates visiting and participating in the upcoming Olympics. The team of some 20 officials from the Unification Ministry, Culture Ministry, and the PyeongChang Olympics Organizing Committee will work to promote and support the activities of the North Korean team. The move comes as South Korea accepted North Korea's counter-proposal to hold talks early on Wednesday on the southern side of the truce village of Panmunjom. The North's suggestion of a time and place came Monday in response to Seoul's initial offer last week, in which Seoul said it would send its Vice Minister for Unification Chun Hae-sung and 2 other delegates. North Korea responded that it will send a 3-member delegation led by Chun Jong-soo, who is vice chairman of the Committee for Peaceful Unification of Korea, North Korea's state agency in charge of inter-Korean affairs. One expert says the North's latest proposal has 2 purposes. The first is for Pyongyang to arrange the terms of its participation in the Olympics, and second is a rather more strategic goal.
The reason is because North Korea wants to start a propaganda campaign to send a message to the wider world that North Korea would like to see peace in this region, as well as make sure that the relationship between two Koreas should be exclusive to the two Koreas and exclude the United States from the issue.
The talks will likely focus on the Olympics rather than politics. Pundits say that the two sides could discuss the details of the North Korean team's visit and their travel route, accommodation, and on the launching of a unified Korean team. Since North Korea suggested using the land route for its art troupe to get to PyeongChang next month, there's speculation that the North will also try to use the land route for its other delegates. Using the land route to visit South Korea is seen as symbolic, as a route passes across the military demarcation line. With the outcome of the discussions on Wednesday, the Seoul government plans to sort out the details of the North's participation with the International Olympic Committee on Saturday in Switzerland. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
A renowned North Korean orchestra will be performing both in Seoul and in Gangneung near the main site for next month's PyeongChang Winter Olympics. With only a few weeks to go, there's no doubt a lot of organizing left to do, but the decision to send the musicians appears to be final. It's not yet clear whether a North Korean girl group will be coming, though. They're said to be Kim Jong-un's favorite. Ji Myung-gil has more.
North Korea said on Monday it will send 140 members of its Samjiyon Orchestra to South Korea during the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics. The troupe will perform in the South Korean capital of Seoul and the city of Gangneung in Gangwon-do province. Gangneung is one of the Olympic host cities where the ice events of the Games will take place.
Seoul and Pyongyang have agreed to continue their talks to decide on the exact venue for the performance, stage settings, and technical aspects such as the show.
The North said it will send an on-site inspection team to check out the venues and to discuss practical matters along with South Korean officials. In response, South Korea promised to provide the North Korean performers with all the necessary support to ensure their comfort and safety. The 140 members from the orchestra will be coming to South Korea by land. They will cross the truce village of Panmunjom on the inter-Korean border. The two sides have agreed to continue consultations via the reopened communication hotline also located in Panmunjom. North Korea observers say Pyongyang could use such art and music performances to convey a softer image amid tightened international sanctions against the regime's nuclear and missile provocations. Following Monday's talks, the two Koreas also agreed to hold further talks on Wednesday, this time on the vice ministerial level in regards to the participation of North Korean athletes in the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. The South Korean government hopes that the North art performance during the PyeongChang Winter Olympics will help improve bilateral relations and foster cultural unity between the South and North. Kimchi, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, foreign ministers from 17 countries will be gathering in Vancouver, Canada, Tuesday to look for a peaceful solution to the North Korea nuclear issue. Ahead of the summit, Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa met with her Canadian counterpart, Chrystia Freeland, on Monday evening local time to discuss bilateral relations and prepare for the summit itself. According to Seoul's Foreign Ministry, Kang praised Canada's role in making Tuesday's meeting possible. She also briefed Friedland on the progress made so far in the inter-Korean talks. Friedland, in response, said that Canada is paying close attention to the outcome of those talks and expressed Canada's support for South Korea in resolving the North Korea nuclear issue peacefully and diplomatically. In this morning's cabinet meeting, President Moon Jae-in called for the government to be more innovative in terms of how it makes policy that affects people's lives. Here's a part of what he had to say.
2018년도 국정 목표는 국민의 삶이 더 나아지게 만드는 것입니다. 이 변화의 시작은 정부부터 좋아지는 것입니다. 정부가 확 바뀌고 있다는 것을 국민들이 체감할 수 있는 정부 혁신이 필요합니다.
President Moon ordered all public institutions to publish transparent financial and business reports and to make all data, apart from personal information, open to the public. He also stressed that all the government's work needs to be centered around social values and should contribute to the public interest and the development of the community. The president once again explained the rationale behind the government raising the minimum wage this year and asked his cabinet to come up with follow-up measures to mitigate the downsides. Some worry about the burden the wage hike will put on small business and possible layoffs. Korea's exports of information and technology products hit an all-time high last year. According to data released Tuesday by the Ministry of Science and ICT, a total of $197.6 billion worth of ICT products were shipped overseas, up some 22% from the previous year. The rise has been attributed to growing overseas demand for Korean computer chips, display panels, and computers. Semiconductors were the top item, exports soaring 60.2% on year to $99.6 billion, followed by display panels, which also increased nearly 8% to more than $30 billion. By region, shipments to China climbed 22.2% to a record high of $10.4 billion. Exports to Vietnam were up 60%, and exports to the United States up 4%. I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
The recent response by the government to the country's cryptocurrency craze came as a bit of a shock. But we finally have some confirmation on Monday that any drastic move like banning exchanges will only be decided after thorough discussions on the matter, as the technology involved could be a driver of economic growth in the future. Our Lee Ji-won has more.
The Korean government's announcement Monday wasn't the blow many crypto traders had feared, a ban on virtual currency exchanges. Rather, officials said there hasn't been a decision yet.
Any plan to shut down the exchanges, which is one possible way to curb speculation, as suggested by the Justice Minister last month, will be decided after thorough discussions and coordination in the government.
The government also said that it'll continue to push forward with a plan to require investors' real names in cryptocurrency trading, and that price manipulation and other crimes will be punished severely. But the government also showed a change in tone, saying it'll invest in research and development of blockchain technology, the computer code that makes cryptocurrency unique. This follows a number of announcements by the government in the past month amid cryptocurrency's exponential rise. Korea is now the third largest Bitcoin trading market in the world after Japan and the US. and experts say there are reasons for the government's concerns.
Koreans are investing in the virtual currency for the wrong reasons. They don't see it as a new form of currency that could make up for the shortcomings of the ones we have now, but as a way to earn huge sums of money in a short amount of time. And with the current security level of the exchanges and the development of blockchain system, it's a very risky investment to make.
Despite the huge potential blockchain technology could have in the future, the experts said it's still in the development stages and that the relatively weak security of the crypto exchanges compared to banks make them more prone to cyber attacks.
The government is doing a good job in warning the public of a possible fall in the market. And having seen a lot of potential in the technology, the government should step up investments in blockchain technology and nurture companies to overcome the current shortcomings.
The expert added it's also vital for the public to see virtual currency not as a speculative tool, but as a potential currency for the future. 이지원, Arirang News.
And to tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-seok from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. So good to see you.
Happy to be here.
All right, so the government made an official announcement on Monday in regards to cryptocurrencies and how it plans to regulate them. So what's your assessment of yesterday's announcement?
Okay, I think throughout this event, I was really disappointed in the government because, well, they kept on one ministry and another ministry didn't seem to know what was going on. And this has always been a problem when you talk about regulations, not just financial regulations, but regulations altogether. People have always complained that various different ministries have various different regulations that are in conflict with each other. And this was, I think, a blatant case of that.
And now last week, Justice Minister Park Sang-gi said that the government is preparing a bill to ban the trading of virtual currency in domestic exchanges, which threw the virtual coin market into turmoil. And before we go on, let's listen to what he said.
A shutdown of exchanges will be one of the goals we are aiming for. It has started to resemble gambling and speculation. The term virtual currency may not even be the right term. We will rather call it a virtual token.
So the Justice Minister's remarks sent Bitcoin prices plummeting, but the market's sharp reaction to Park's remarks, after that, the presidential office said hours later that a ban on countries' virtual currency exchanges had not been decided yet.
Okay, well, I think the problem is we don't quite know how to place these cryptocurrencies, whether they are currency or whether they are an investment asset like precious metals, or whether they're just a method for gambling. It has elements of all three. Now, if you take a look at, say, a Bitcoin as an example, it has, I think, three important characteristics. First, it's a virtual electronic currency, but that's a good thing. It's like a credit card, and we use it all the time.
Right.
Second is the blockchain technology. That is also a good thing because it allows a dispersed record keeping. In fact, blockchain is not only used in virtual currencies, but now they're looking at possible uses elsewhere. For example, keeping records of containers used during exports. So you'll know instantly or within a reasonable period of time what's included in those containers, and that information is allowed to go to people who need it fairly quickly. The problem that Bitcoins and other virtual currencies have is that a lot of them have fixed supply, and there's no central authority controlling that supply. And that's not a technological decision, that's a political, economic decision. And that creates a room for a lot of volatility. Now, if we compare Bitcoins or these type of virtual currencies to other type of investment goods, if you compare it to currency, well, these prices are always decided by a combination of fundamentals and expectations of future price changes. And in the case of most currencies, you have a central bank trying to keep the value stable. So that forms a fundamental of a short, it forms an anchor. Now, in terms of, say, things like investment assets like precious metals, you have past history, and a lot of these precious metals do have industrial uses, so that also acts as an anchor for the fundamental. But because virtual currency is cryptocurrency is so new, it doesn't have a long history, it doesn't have any other use other than transactions. It really doesn't have an anchor yet. So the expectations of future price changes, component of prices are going to be very high. That means whatever, depending on changes in psychology, you're going to see big volatility in prices, and that's, I think, exactly what we're seeing.
And the government had actually said that the fact that the media is using this, the phrase Kimchi premium reflects the foreigners' assessment of Korean market as abnormal. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, that's a really interesting event because we usually don't expect to see something like Kimchi premium. That's about 20 to 30% above the prices of these cryptocurrencies and other countries' markets. So part of the reason seems to be that arbitrage is not working very well. And the reason for that is that a lot of large financial institutions are not getting involved in arbitraging. And so most of the arbitrage is taking place among individual investors. And a lot of these individual investments are limited by the amount of foreign currency that they can buy because there's Korean foreign currency laws limiting the amount of transactions you can make. That's one explanation. Another explanation, I think, which deserves some more research is that, well, there's a lot of newspaper stories where reporters try to arbitrage themselves. And because the price of these cryptocurrencies are 20 to 30% cheaper overseas, they thought that they could make a pure profit. But apparently after paying all the fees, all the payments that they need to make for transfers, they don't make any money. And I think if that is true, then it signals that there's a fundamental problem with transaction costs in the Korean financial markets. And because we're trying to develop our financial markets, if those type of fees, those type of high transaction costs exist in the financial market, that means Korea cannot really develop its financial markets.
And I know you mentioned a little bit, but at this point we're kind of wondering, I mean, how are other countries dealing with cryptocurrencies?
Okay, well, countries like Japan and Russia, they're trying to formalize these cryptocurrencies into a usable currency. Obviously, it won't be a national currency like the yen or the ruble, but perhaps like a gift card. So that's their approach. The United States, well, they don't have a formal regulation in place yet, national regulation. Some states do. They do have guidelines on trying to get all the states to form a similar type of regulation. They also have regulations trying to limit the use of these cryptocurrencies in money laundering. And then they do have, they're trying to work out a system of how to tax the profits from these cryptocurrencies. Most likely it'll be a part of capital gains tax, but still they're working toward that. China, I think, is looking at this as a disruption. So they've banned mining for these cryptocurrencies, and they're trying to discourage the use of it.
So the government has found special measures to clamp down on the overheated cryptocurrency market, but said plans to ban the trading of virtual money aren't in the pipeline yet. So before we go on, let's take a listen to Chung Ki-jun, the head of the Office for Government Policy Coordination's Economic Policy Coordination Office, on the matter.
The government will push forward with the implementation of a real name system for cryptocurrency transactions. At the same time, the government will crack down on illegal activities involving virtual money, including market manipulation, money laundering and tax evasion, through joint probes by the prosecution and police. The government will decide on a proposed shutdown of virtual currency exchanges after carrying out sufficient consultations with the related agencies.
So with all those measures, I mean, what are some of the changes that we can expect from here on out in regards to cryptocurrency transactions?
Okay, I think they're going back to the plans that they had before the Justice Minister's surprise. That involved a real name system, so that if you want to trade in cryptocurrencies, you have to use your real name. You can only have one specific account where you can make transactions with cryptocurrencies. And then financial institutions are not allowed to transact these cryptocurrencies to trying to make a profit, and they're not allowed to use these cryptocurrencies as a safe asset. I think those are pretty much prudential regulations, but I think they do need some more prudential regulations here. I think the two most important regulations that you need is one, this is a very volatile market. It's a very dangerous market. So I think it's very important that government guarantees that if people are wiped out from these markets, there will be no help.
Okay.
If in Korean economy, when you have a wipeout in the stock market or wipeout in the housing market, there's a lot of pressure to rescue some of those people.
Right.
And because this is such a volatile market, I think if you do that, you'll create a moral hazard on the part of investors so that they'll keep making these dangerous, volatile investments. And I think there is a need for these type of high-risk, high-return investments. But on the other hand, they should not be encouraged to do that too much.
Right.
So I think that's one way of limiting it. Another very important way of limiting it is to restrict debt-financed investments in cryptocurrency. If we look at the financial crisis that we had not only in Asia but globally in the last 20 years or so, a lot of it comes from debt-financed investments into a speculative bubble. And right now, I don't see that many regulations trying to limit debt-financed investments into cryptocurrency. You can invest in cryptocurrency with your own money, but don't use borrowed money to do it. Now, I don't think the investments in cryptocurrency in Korea is large enough to possibly create a bank crisis. But even if it's not that large, limiting the amount of debt that you can use to invest in these volatile investments will keep people from just being completely wiped out. A way to limit the debt-financed investment in this case, I think, is to expand DSR that we were talking about for the housing market more generally, so people won't be able to borrow extensively to into cryptocurrency is something that must be taken. Some regulations should be put in place. Must be.
Then do you think this new system will allow an establishment of a taxation plan for cryptocurrency transactions? I
think that's the intent. United States is moving toward taxing these as capital gains. And well, it's an if you think of it as an investment, then it should be treated like any other financial investment. So it should be taxed like any other financial investment.
All right. Well, now with all the ongoing controversy surrounding the domestic cryptocurrency market, in what ways do you think the government should tackle problems involving cryptocurrencies?
Okay, as I mentioned before, the plans that were released before the Justice Minister's announcement, I think, are part of prudential regulations. We want to maintain some high-risk, high-return investment, but we don't want it to get too large so that it affects the entire economy or has a possibility of paralyzing the financial sector.
Right.
So those measures that are already announced are a good start, but as I mentioned before, limiting debt-financed investment, I think, is absolutely crucial, and government should move on that right away.
Well, what about some long-term measures then? I mean, there are calls for the government to come up with some long-term measures compared to the measures that they put forth right now.
Okay, well, I think as I mentioned, limiting the debt is definitely part of the picture. I think if you go through a volatile drop in price 2 or 3 times, then this bubble will basically disappear.
Okay.
But as I mentioned before, government has to commit itself to not rescuing people from dropping these investments. Otherwise, you're just going to raise the possibility of having more bubbles because, well, if I gain, then it's my gain, but if I lose, government will compensate me for some of it. It'll create a big moral hazard. We don't want to encourage that.
Right.
So it may be very difficult because a lot of these investments are made by middle class or lower income people, but still, government, I think, has to commit itself to not encouraging these type of investment too much, and as I emphasize again, no debt-financed investments.
All right, let's hope to see more on that front. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow at the same time, same place with more of the day's top news stories and a closer look at ongoing issues here in Korea and around the world. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and goodbye.
On a cold ice track, you perform and showcase your best skill. The final moment where the results of 4 years of sweat starts. Now the competition begins here at PyeongChang. The difference of 1/1000th of a second on the cold ice track. Passion that can't be stopped forever, making us feel that heat. The 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics, where passion is made and where passion meets the world. PyeongChang. Arirang.